Hey everybody, welcome back. Today we're going to do an update video on the Ford Ranger project. I haven't done a video on that in a little while, so I wanted to update everybody on where that is and where the truck is right now. As you can see here, we have the engine put mostly back together. We'll talk a little bit more about the engine in a minute. I wanted to start off talking a little bit about where the truck is. I actually took a little break from working on the engine for a while, and I started to think about supporting modifications that I needed to make to the truck. And one of the mods that I wanted to do was do a rear axle upgrade. The truck came with a 7.5-inch rear axle with an open differential, and I wanted to upgrade it to an 8.8-inch with a limited slip differential in it. And a pretty popular upgrade for the Rangers is to use a mid-90s to early 2000s Ford Explorer rear axle. You usually can get an 8.8 and limited slip differential, and you also end up with a rear disc upgrade as well. And another benefit is if you're having a lower truck like I do, you eliminate the need for the flip kit because the Explorers are already an axle over spring setup. So I'd originally set off to go ahead and find one of those axles for my truck. And I actually had a lot harder time than I expected finding what I needed. I wasn't able to get anything local. I just wasn't really willing to ship something that heavy or drive, several hours to go get one. So what I ended up doing, I ended up putting an axle in it from another 97 Ranger. It would have been probably a four-wheel drive truck that came out of. So it was an 8.8-inch with a factory track lock and 373 gears. Now, I didn't get the rear disc brakes that you benefited from getting from the Explorers, but you do get a little bigger drum setup in a 10-inch versus 9-inch. And to be honest, I really don't care about that. The disc would have been a nice upgrade, but honestly, I was really just looking for the bigger axle itself and the track lock differential. On the upside, the other Ranger axle was a direct bolt-in for my truck, so I didn't have to do anything special for that to fit in there. I did go ahead and rebuild everything on it, though. It got all new bearings and seals, all new brake components. Basically, you name it, it got it, brake lines, everything. So it's essentially a brand new axle went into the truck. And while I was at it, I replaced the rear leaf springs too. As many of you might know, if you've worked on these trucks before, since they're pretty old, the bushings can be a major pain. And generally the bolts are seized up, and it's a lot of effort to get that out. I just ended up going with a brand new set of leaf springs. And out of that, they were supposed to be the same springs, but I ended up getting probably another half-inch to drop out of the back. The ride's a little bit softer than it was before, but I'm not unhappy with it. It sets a little bit lower. So that's okay with me. So like I said, that axle build did take attention away from doing this engine. So I was only recently able to get back to start to work on this again. As of the last video, I had already put the block back together, but I hadn't yet touched the head. So I went over the head recently and I put new cam bearings in it and new cam seal and everything. But everything else pretty much went right back together after it was cleaned. I did measure the valves and the valve guides and all that good stuff, and everything came back within spec, so I decided to go ahead and just use everything as is. I do have a few miscellaneous cooling system parts that I need to buy for this that are just too corroded and rusty from the original truck's parts to use here. So I got a few parts left to buy, but overall this block's pretty much ready to go, other than to go ahead and put the timing system components back in as well. But before I do that, I want to go ahead and prime the oil pump and make sure I have pressure. And I want to do that before I put the timing belt on. But overall, it's really starting to come back together. My pile of parts is finally starting to get smaller. It seems like there might be a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel here, and I might actually finish this thing sometime in the next couple of months, but we'll see. Back to the truck, I really need to start thinking about fuel system upgrades and how I'm going to control everything. I was thinking about using some sort of piggyback system, if anybody's ever heard of Tweaker, but that's something that is made specifically for the Ford engine controls from this time period. But more recently, I've been starting to think about the possibility of using some sort of a standalone as well. If anybody has any suggestions on what I should do there, I would definitely love to hear them in the comments. I'm definitely no expert when it comes to that sort of thing, so this is new ground for me, and I could use all the help that I can get. As far as the turbo, I mentioned in the last video that I hadn't yet sent it out for a rebuild, and I still haven't. I've kind of been on the fence about using it. It's an original Mustang SVO turbo, and I've thought about switching over to something with an external wastegate instead of the internal wastegate that these had. It just might make my life a little bit easier in the long run. Again, if you have any suggestions on that, I'd love to hear them in the comments. But keep in mind, this is a budget build. I am trying to use quality parts on what I do replace, but I'm not trying to spend every dollar that I have on this project either. So I'm trying to have some sort of a balance between, high quality and just stuff that makes sense. I'm not trying to make 500 horsepower with this truck. And so I realistically, I know that's not going to happen with the parts that I'm going to put on it and the money that I'm going to spend. So keep that in mind. Realistically, given the parts that I'm putting on this and the amount of money that I'm planning to put into it, I really don't see getting more than 200 to 250 horsepower out of this setup. But if you disagree, by all means, let me know in the comments. And really, that's not far off of what I would end up getting out of a V8 swap and with some bolt-ons, which has definitely at times had me second guess my choices to go this route. There's been a couple times recently where I've thought about it and whether or not that I should just abandon this project and go to the V8, and I've decided to stick with what I'm doing here. I think both of those different options offer easier things in certain areas. But then if you look at it, there's more complicated things elsewhere. So I really think in the end, they sort of even out. It's sort of a wash with what you end up with. Though in the long run, I think the V8 probably would have more potential. It's really hard to say. I think really what it just comes down to is you can do anything if you spend enough money. And you can make these 2.3s make a lot of power if you put enough money into them. That's been proven time and time again. In my case, like I said, I'm not trying to do that. I'm trying to make something that makes reasonable power, that makes this truck a lot of fun. And I think we'll be able to do that with what I'm doing here. But that's where we are right now. Like I said, I have a few more parts to order, and I should be able to button up the engine for the most part, decide what I want to do as far as a turbo, and then start to really get serious about thinking about fuel and how I'm controlling it, and go from there. Well, that's all I have for today's video, everybody. I hope you enjoyed it. Stay tuned for the future videos on this. I know it's been a little while since I did an update video for the Ford Ranger, but I'm trying to get back into it again here, and you should see more in the near future. All right, everybody, thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.